Hello again. We're going to talk today about the table saw and the planer, and we're going to talk about how each of them are used and what is the intersection of their functionality, and do you really need a planer if you have a table saw. As always, we ask that you subscribe to these videos, and then you'll be able to see the future ones and be notified of them. And also hit the like button, which will allow it to be shared to a lot of other people more easily. This is a 13-inch planer. The 13-inch refers to the width of the bed. So you can pass a piece of wood up to 13 inches in width through this planer. And what the planer does is it firmly holds the piece of wood against this flat surface, and then planer blades run across the top of the wood and reduce the thickness and even out the that is, make the top of the board parallel to the bottom that's sitting on here. Those are the two functions of a planer. So if you're going to use a planer, you're either trying to get the two surfaces parallel, or you're trying to reduce the thickness of a board up to 13 inches wide. Now, what does this have to do with a table saw? Let's go over to the table saw and talk about that. So here we have a table saw, and the table saw we're going to be using in the rip mode. If we're trying to reduce the thickness of a board, or if we're trying to make both sides of the board parallel to one another. And you can do those both with this table saw like you can with a planer. But with the table saw, we are limited. The way to do that is to bring the blade, the fence, fairly close to the blade and pass the blade through it, and thereby reducing the thickness. That's the first thing this operation would do, the rip operation. The second thing it would do, because this face of the board is up against this surface of the fence, the blade will cut this board parallel to this face of this fence. So we are reducing the thickness of the board, and we are making the face that we are cutting parallel to the face that's against the fence. The limitation of the table saw is that this is a 10-inch table saw, and it has a 10-inch blade on it, and I can't cut a board that's wider, in this case taller, than this blade sticks up out of the table. So the bottom line is that this table saw can make boards thinner, and it can make the two surfaces, the top and bottom of the board, parallel to one another, but you are limited to a board, the width of how much your blade sticks out of the table saw. This operation, by the way, I need to warn you, this operation of reducing the thickness of this already thin piece of wood can be a dangerous operation on the table saw, and you need to do two things about that. Number one is in some way hold the board tightly, firmly against the fence, and then use an appropriate push stick to guide it through the blade and not have the blade hit the push stick. And both of those can be a bit dangerous. And of course you need a face mask or safety glasses. So you can do the same thing with the table saw, but you're restricted in the width of the board that you can manipulate. Whereas in a planer, you can do, in this particular case, up to 13 inches, and you can buy planers that are even bigger than that. So again, please subscribe if you liked what you saw, and hit the like button. Okay, so we've seen today that the purpose of a planer is to reduce the thickness of a board and at the same time make the top surface of the board perfectly parallel to the bottom surface of the board. And we've seen that we can do that very safely on this planer on boards up to width on this planer of 13 inches. That's fairly variable. We also saw that on the table saw we can take a piece of wood and we can reduce its thickness, and we can make sure that the surface that was just cut is absolutely parallel to the surface that was up against the fence. But we can only do it on a very limited width, up to probably about 4 inches. And we've seen that it's dangerous to do, or it's potentially dangerous, and we have to be very careful from a safety perspective. So I would say that if you have a table saw and you don't have the money to buy a planer, you could get by if you were only doing very narrow boards, and if you were willing to deal with the safety issues. But otherwise, you probably would want to get a planer. The results may not be quite as true also, depending on how good your blade is and how well sharpened it is. You might not get as smooth a surface on that cut surface as you would like to see. Again, if you like what you've seen, please hit the subscribe button and also like our video.